welcome everyone. My name is Erin Meyer. I'm the Sustainable Food Programs Coordinator at UC Merced. I coordinate some food rescue programs, the People's Fridge, the Bobcat Eats Food Waste Awareness and Prevention Program, amongst some other things. So our mission is to save the food and feed the people, but we also decided we want to do some fun things. So we started an AMA series, not that that's not fun, but other fun virtual things, right? So we started a AMA series where we just get experts on the line and we ask them fun questions, or you all can ask them fun questions. And Guillermo and I started this program probably back in April, and we've had some really cool guests on, and I'm super excited to have Evan today. But I wanted to throw it over to Guillermo real quick to also introduce himself.
Hey everyone, this is Guillermo Ortiz. I'm the Sustainability and Diversity Educational Programs Manager at UC Merced. I really explore the intersection of equity and sustainability, and a topic that's really been kind of in the mainstream or coming up in the mainstream in recent months, if not most recent years. And so I'm really glad that we can have Evan here and have a great conversation that we're all really going to be engaged in and really talk about all the work that needs to go into climate action. So Evan, thank you so much for agreeing to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Evan, do you want to kind of tell people your biography, what you do, things like that?
Sure, yeah. So, my background, I sort of cut my teeth. So going way back, I'm also a UC student. I graduated from UC Santa Barbara back in 2013. Really enjoyed my time there. I studied fine art, communication, and then I did this little certificate program in the engineering department focused on technology entrepreneurship. And it was that program that really got me interested. I mean, I was already interested in sort of, leveraging technology for impact. But that program really got me excited about sort of what the possibilities could be. I've always been interested in finding ways, I'm a big believer in sort of harnessing social capital for getting things done. I just believe fundamentally that even with great technology, we need really smart people with positive intentions working to leverage that technology for good. But as it happens to be, I graduated with a lot of student debt, and I needed to get a job. So I went and worked at Oracle, the big software company. If you're familiar with Oracle, in fact, I'm sure UC Merced's infrastructure runs a lot on Oracle. And I was doing enterprise software sales there for about 2 years. I knew that path was not for me. The big corporate life was not going to be my calling. And I think I'm really happy I listened to my gut. And I decided that I wanted to maybe go work for a startup, but I didn't know anyone in that space. So I thought, okay, well, how do I break into this? I realized that the best way I could sort of socially engineer my way into getting to know people who are in the startup world is if I start a blog where I interview people who are doing that. So I started working on a blog with my friend Danny, and she was covering New York and I was covering the Bay Area, and we would interview founders who had just raised their first round of capital. And that worked really well because after interviewing 3 founders, I had 2 job offers to work for the startups that they were working on. And I'll just mention right now, if you are watching this and you're thinking, how do I break into a space that I don't know anyone in or don't know a lot about? People love to be interviewed. Aaron reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to come do this? And I said, yes. And if you have a website or something like that, Aaron has UC Merced behind her. So you'd be surprised what kind of conversations you can have with people if you're giving them some sort of audience. So I took a job at a company, a very early stage startup that had just gone through Y Combinator called Make School. And Make School is now we raised a couple of rounds of funding. We grew a lot. I helped grow their team internationally. Actually now Make School is a nonprofit college, a accredited degree granting university here in San Francisco. So I guess in that weird way, I can say that I helped start a college. But what I noticed is that at Make School, a lot of the students who are coming into Make School to learn how to code and become software engineers, a lot of them were really interested in doing this, not just to make good money and have careers, but also really to like make a difference in the world. After Make School, I did a very short gig, basically doing some recruiting work at a company that was focused on building technology tools to help progressive and liberal organizations be able to evangelize their work, raise capital from their constituents more effectively using text messages. So a very purpose-driven organization. And I noticed the same thing, that we were still a pretty early stage startup. We had just raised our Series A when I joined. And we were getting engineers from Uber, from Facebook, from from Google, at a fraction of the costs that they were, at a fraction of the salary that they were commanding at these other larger corporations. And well, why was that? Well, it's because we had a mission that really resonated with them. And so I'm mentioning all of this background, not only my own personal experience looking for mission-driven work, not only what I noticed our students seeking the same kind of mission-driven work at Make School, and also seeing that when I played the role of a recruiter at a mission-driven organization, that we were able to attract all this talent. I'm mentioning this because that's really the core of what we're working on at Climatebase today. I took all that experience, and the thesis that I got is that the smartest people in the world, more often than not, want to leverage their talents and dedicate their hours towards work that is important. Now, how do you define impactful or important work? Thank you for the heart. I appreciate that. Alicia, is that right? Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I also heart what I was saying there. Basically, what I've come to is that I took some time off, by the way, after I did all this stuff. And I honestly, 3 months turned into 6 months of traveling, turned into like over a year of taking time off from working. And this was, of course, after I paid off my student loans. I would not suggest to anyone to spend a year traveling if you haven't already paid off your student loans. And during this time, I was really reflecting a lot on sort of, what do I care about? And the next big thing that I could think of that I wanted to work on, I had done some education work, I had done some political tech work, was climate change. And I wanted a climate job. And I was going to the big job platforms and I was typing in climate, because I think that's what a lot of people do when you're looking for climate work. You type in climate or climate change jobs. Now, if you do that right now on Google and you type in climate jobs, my suspicion is that climate.careers, which is one of the domains that we manage at Climatebase, will be the first thing that shows up. But when I was doing this, before Climatebase, again, formerly known as climate.careers, before that was a thing that we were working on, I was basically just finding, links to stuff on Indeed or LinkedIn. And when you're on these big job platforms and you are looking for the keyword search climate, you're going to only pretty much find jobs that have the keyword climate listed in the title or maybe in the job description. But in fact, as I discovered going deeper on this, let me mention, I'm not qualified for like a climate scientist position. I'm not a climate reporter. I'm not, my background does not make me eligible for roles that most of the roles that have the keyword climate listed in the title. And so I realized pretty immediately, like, wow, like I guess I'm just not cut out for climate work. But then of course I started going a little deeper and I was realizing that actually at organizations that are working on climate, there's a lot of roles that I might be well qualified for. Things like, head of community or a sales position or HR work or doing recruiting work at one of these organizations. But roles, jobs that don't include that keyword climate in the title. So I wasn't finding these opportunities. What happened then is that as I'm coming to realize that keyword search is just not powerful and not sophisticated enough to unearth the kind of jobs at climate focused organizations that I was looking for, at around this time I got introduced to the work by Project Drawdown. By the way, Aaron, please interrupt me if you want to break my story up into chunks. Just chime in. Otherwise I'm going to keep going.
I do have one lingering question though that you could probably answer for me pretty easily. I want to learn more about this blog and read it. So if you have this old blog somewhere, if you have the website, I would love to check that out.
I actually don't. I was working with friends, excuse me, not COVID, just dehydrated. No, I was working on my friend Danny's blog. She managed it was called Hackers of, like .com, I think. Hackers of, I think is what it was, or maybe Hackers of X, something like that. If you search it, maybe you'll find it. I'm not sure. But yeah, sorry, I don't know if it's live anymore, and I haven't looked at it in a long time. But it's probably, you know what, you can probably find the link to it maybe from my my LinkedIn if you go there. Anyway, so I guess jumping back in, I was realizing the limitations of these job platforms when it comes to searching for climate jobs. I got then introduced to the work by Project Drawdown. So I was sitting in my friend's trailer. He's a regenerative rancher up here in Northern California, kind of near Davis. And he was, now he's in Petaluma. Anyway, that doesn't matter. I'm sitting in his ranch visiting him in his trailer on the ranch. And I'm like, oh, I want to work in climate, but God, I can't figure out how to identify the orgs that are working on climate change. And then he's like, you know, you should take a look at this book. And he hands me this book, and it's called Drawdown. If you're curious to learn more about that, go to drawdown.org. The book is out of date. They have a website now. And what Project Drawdown is the organization behind this book. What they do, and what they documented in this book that I was handed, was they basically have a data sort of centric approach to identifying, categorizing, and even ranking the top sort of solutions to climate change. And that includes, of course, you know, alternative power generation techniques that don't rely on burning fossil fuels. It includes, you know, changing the way that we grow food, the way that we even consume food and deal with food waste. It includes transportation. It's across the entire spectrum of sort of everything that we do in society. How we manage land, and even how we empower women in society. You know, I just saw this framework, and I was like literally flipping through this book, and it reads, it's like a coffee table book, and it reads like a, God, I actually have it around here somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in this room. I know that. And I'm just like, oh my God, like here's a framework of climate solutions. And immediately my question was, I want to know every single solution. I want to know every single organization that's working on these solutions. And I want to know who's hiring. And that resource didn't exist. And so I basically set out on a path to build that resource. And, you know, in the 2 years since that sort of light bulb moment, you know, what happened is that we started building a spreadsheet. And then that spreadsheet, we figured, okay, well, this is valuable for us, but it's me and my brother, who is now my co-founder, you know, a lot of our friends started asking if they could look at this. And then we were like, you know, this resource maybe is valuable to folks. Let's experiment with leveraging this thing we built and use it to start a career fair. This is, of course, back when you could gather hundreds of people in a small, sweaty room. And we did that in San Francisco. We organized the world's first climate career fair. And then what happened is that, like, we didn't have a website or anything at the time. We were just like two people with no experience in climate, who just wanted to see what would happen if we could, you know, get people in the room with employers. And what happened is that over 700 people RSVP'd on the day of. Over 500 people attended. It was literally like we had a line out the door. Keep in mind, this was just me and my brother, to the point where like it got so hectic so quickly that like people who attended the event were like coming up to us being like, can we help? Like, can we help you run this event like right now on the spot? Like, do you need someone like introducing people when they get in the building? Like, do you need people to like pick up the pizzas that you're ordering? Like, and like, it was amazing. Like, we had this like organic little team that formed like on the very moment that we did the event. All this to say is like, I literally I still get messages to this day. I got an email literally earlier today from someone who got a job from that event, just reaching out and thanking me for, you know, helping organize that. From that event alone, a bunch of people got jobs. But what that event really showed me and my brother is that, wow, a lot of people want to work in climate, because, you know, we just had a Facebook event, no brand or anything. And we were able to amass this massive audience. We even had people driving up from San Diego to San Francisco just to attend this thing. So we thought, okay, this is clearly not very scalable. There's lots of demand for this. Let's take this experience that we created in person and bring it online. And the obvious first MVP of what that is a job board. So, I won't go into detail on sort of the website development, but what I'll say is that we launched Climatebase. The website, we went live in the very, very end of really the beginning of 2020. So like literally like New Year's 2020. We did our more public launch on a platform called Product Hunt. We did that in July and of 2020. And in the last 12 months, we've been able to attract over 120,000 website users. About 10% of those folks have actually created full-on profiles. And as of 4 days ago, if you go to climatebase.org and you click the community tab at the top of our website, which by the way, we're going to change to people. It'll be called people, because to call it a community is, well, anyway, it's a little disingenuous. But if you click that, you'll see that there are about 10% of all of our website users who have actually created profiles that are public on our platform. So you can almost think of that as like a reverse monster.com or a reverse Indeed, but for talent. And so when you consider what Climatebase is today, a directory of jobs, a directory of organizations that are working on climate, including both nonprofits, philanthropic organizations, even government initiatives, and also a directory of people who are either wanting to or are currently working in climate. The picture that we are starting to paint at Climatebase is essentially the LinkedIn for climate, which again, this is just something that isn't satisfied on the big job platforms like LinkedIn because of that core issue that we realized very early on, which is that keyword search just does not work for climate. So that's the very sort of short version, told in a slightly long-winded story, wrapped up as quickly as I could. So I'll pause there for now.
Thank you. Fascinating. I have one question. It looks like there's another in chat. Actually, I have a lot of questions, but the first one, you used to have an event tab, and you would have like climate related events. Is that coming back? Is that gone for good?
No, it's coming back. You know what it was is we had an intern. It was great. I miss Sarah, but we're still unfunded as an organization. We haven't accepted any funding, and it's something that I probably need to get going on, which I can now do now that we have like a public directory of our users. I can talk to investors and say, hey, look, when I say that we've had all these thousands of people creating profiles, it's not theoretical. This is real. But because we've been unfunded, I couldn't pay Sarah, and she leveraged her experience with us and her previous experience as a student at UC Berkeley and got a job working for Senator Scott Weiner. So she's now, off to bigger and better things. And as a result, the person who was managing that events directory, we no longer have that person. So I should probably find a new intern to help with projects like that. We will bring back the events directory. But we're also going to be doing a lot of our own events on Climatebase as well. We announced this fellowship program, and it was designed to be like a 10-week long, super intensive, relatively intimate group of top tier talent. It's a program that you have to apply for. If you're accepted, there's also a tuition fee. And in this, we would be multiple times every week bringing on leaders of the organizations that are listed on Climatebase, and basically doing like an AMA type thing the same way we are right now, followed by Q&A, followed by essentially like a 10-week extended sort of make-a-thon or hackathon for those who are technical. What's happened is that we got way too much demand for this program. So you folks are the first to hear it, but I'm gonna actually be emailing out everyone who's applied, which is almost 2,000 people, and letting them know that, unfortunately, we have this very good problem. Too many people want to experience this kind of thing. And we see a better opportunity to lower the price point dramatically and let in a lot more people and actually leverage product on Climatebase as opposed to just Zoom and like a Slack thing. but actually build it into our product to make this a more democratized experience. So I guess to answer your question, Aaron, yes, we will be bringing back an events directory, and also we're going to be doing a lot of events ourselves at Climatebase with the leaders and the members of the organizations that you see listed on our platform, which is really going back to our core. It's about shining a light on the work that is being done and needs to be done in order for us to combat the climate crisis.
Awesome. So a couple of ideas, but I bet UC Merced would be very interested in helping with those events or being part of that piece of it. But I also bet there would be a ton of UC students that would be interested in some sort of internship or volunteer project to help you with that kind of thing. And I do have, I mean, this might be talking out of turn, but Liz is part of our audience. I think she is still here, I hope. Liz, awesome. Do you want to introduce your question? Maybe this is a good time for that. She had a question about kind of exactly this and everything. So Liz, how are you?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and congratulations on finding, the purpose and the why in your work. And that's fabulous. I'm actually with the Career Center at UC Merced. I have dual role. I'm student facing. I'm the career specialist for the School of Engineering. And then I'm also the interim director of employer connections and internships. So I would love to explore with you ways in which we can introduce students who are interested in climate and climate change careers to your organization, to the opportunities that your participants have available, and then also perhaps even look at a platform to make some of those events, especially if they're around industry understanding and career readiness in the sector, that we can look at making some of those events and opportunities known and available to UC Merced students. So appreciate your work, appreciate your passion. And again, as your interest and your organization's interest allows, we'd love to continue the conversation.
I would love that. I mean, one of the big initiatives that we really want to do, and again, this is, we're still pre-funding, but if there's, someone out there perhaps looking for some internship experience, one of the big things that we would like to do is have someone focused on working and really reaching out to career centers at universities and at the very least just letting them know that we exist, that if they that if they're interested in helping their students find meaningful, impactful, climate focused work, that you don't have to be an environmental science scientist to be able to have an impact on climate. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a you can be literally anything and find a role at an organization that's working on climate change. So I would love that. So we should chat. I'll drop my email here in the chat over here. But yeah, what we're probably going to do, and Aaron, I don't know where this is going to be published. Hopefully not too widely, because I don't know if I don't want to commit to this publicly. But what I'll say is that it's very likely that it's nice to know that there is lots of demand for what we were, sort of what we've been working on with this fellowship program. But what's core to our mission is really about mobilizing, lots and lots and lots of people, and not just a selective group. So I mean, it'll still be selective, but what we want to do is really make sure that our fellowship program is something that is at a price point that is really accessible to people who might be students. So, probably as opposed to making the program, I mean, when we initially advertised it, it was set at $1,700 for a 10-week program. I'm more interested in, lowering it down by, 80% discount of what that is, so that we can make this program far more accessible and make it a larger audience of people. And quite frankly, from the perspective of building a community too, I think that there's a sweet spot, and it's not 80 people or 100 people. It's a couple hundred people that you want in a community, in a cohort, because it makes it more interesting when you have like a lot of other people that you can connect with and kind of go through that experience with. So yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is, making this program and all that we do when it comes to events and education, making this more accessible to folks who might be like me when I was in my early 20s, as a student with taking out loans and not able to justify spending $1,000 on a program. So it's about democratization of opportunity and education.
Great. We will talk. I'll be in touch with you, and we'll find a mutually convenient time where we can follow that conversation. Thank you. Thanks for being open.
That would be great. I would love that. Also, for anyone listening, feel free to create a profile on Climatebase. I have a profile on Climatebase, and I would encourage you to feel free to use that profile to message me. You can message me through Climatebase now. This is, again, like 3 days old. So by the way, some people are having trouble saving their profiles, apparently. We're going to hopefully have that bug taken care of by end of day today. But please do create a profile, even if you can't save it. That'll be fixed again by end of day. But yeah, you can message me through Climatebase also.
Hey Evan, this is Guillermo. I have a quick question. So when I did my undergrad in climate change science and policy at Johns Hopkins University, and when I had kind of signed up for that major freshman in 2010, right? That major had been created maybe 2-3 years prior, because climate change and climate work, even though the science behind climate change has been going on for a long time, the career and understanding of climate change as a problem and getting people to solve that problem was relatively new. And so you have all of these new majors popping up in higher ed related to climate. And then you're also seeing that in the workforce. You're seeing brand new jobs related to climate change, whether it's your traditional like policy work or academic work or even business. But now we're also seeing conversations around climate justice, right? Which brings in like civil rights organizations. It brings in equity, other equity-based organizations. When you're thinking about, what is a climate career and how do you host that on your website with this kind of ever broadening of the space as more people are getting into it and more people are realizing, how the breadth of the problem, how are you really evolving to kind of make sure that everything from folks who are working in healthcare but might also be working on affordable housing and other people who might be working tech specific skill sets can also find those jobs that are in the climate space but needing their skills just as much as your traditional earth and planetary science or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so the way that we think about what is a climate, so just so I'm understanding the question correctly, it's basically about like how do we define a climate job, and then also like how do we see what a climate job is? How do we see that sort of evolving and changing? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Especially one of the things that came up is kind of like I worked in federal policy around climate as well, and one of the things is it's like even the climate jobs that we have right now, right? If we put ourselves 20, 30 years, there's going to be folks who are working in climate jobs that we haven't even thought of yet. And so how are you saying like adaptable to this like ever growing space, right?
Yeah. Well, so so Stripe, the payment processing platform, they announced a new initiative a while back. They finally rolled it out, but they're allowing vendors leveraging Stripe to be able to offset their carbon footprint of their shipping costs and stuff like that. Now they were hiring for their climate team. They have like an internal team that's entirely focused on this. Again, this is a big like multi-billion-dollar tech company. and they have an entire team now dedicated to climate. And part of that is because the leadership of that organization is outstanding and forward-thinking and ethical. But the roles that they're hiring for, we consider those climate jobs, those roles within that organization. But that organization is not climate focused. And so those jobs that are climate focused are welcome on our platform, and we consider those climate jobs. These were like software engineers and product designers. For most organizations on our platform, that are hiring on our platform, they are climate focused organizations, meaning that the way we view that is like, if your organization's mission or the core, or rather the core of what your organization is doing is specifically focused on climate in some way, whether it's focused on policy or research or a specific solution or a set of solutions, we would consider that entire organization climate focused, and therefore all the jobs in that organization are climate jobs. So that's like at a high level, like how we think of what a climate job is. We partnered with Clean Energy for Biden, which is like a nonprofit sort of community, grassroots community that's really like a lot of clean tech folks who came together during the Biden administration's campaign to basically raise a lot of money for Biden. But we partnered with them to help fill Biden's cabinet with climate-minded candidates in roles that are not necessarily climate focused on the surface. Roles within the Department of Agriculture and stuff. To people who maybe aren't super familiar with climate change might think, well, how is that a climate job? But as you and many other folks here on this call might recognize, we need people who understand what climate change is and take it seriously to be filling all kinds of roles. So that would be an example of like an organization that like isn't the Biden administration. I mean, are they climate focused as an organization? No, they're working on so much more than just that. But they wanted climate candidates working in these roles that are climate impactful, but aren't necessarily focused specifically only on climate. Okay, so that's enough of how we define that. In terms of like where we're seeing where are the hot spots for jobs within this sort of kind of broad umbrella definition that we consider as climate jobs. This might not be the answer that people want to hear, but the reality is that there's a lot of need for engineers. And I'm not saying like, if you want to work in climate, become an engineer, but I'll tell you, it certainly helps. Honestly, software engineering is one of the most common jobs that's listed on our platform. And that's because software engineering and product design, I mean, these skill sets are ubiquitous and easily applicable to many different things. Everyone needs a website these days. Everyone needs a website. And quite frankly, Squarespace is not going to cut it from most organizations. A lot of organizations are dealing with lots of data too. So understanding how to manipulate data and use data to get things done efficiently. Having some data science skills, probably pretty important if you want to work in climate. But again, these are skill sets that are applicable to like any modern sort of job market, I would say. What you're talking about in terms of like advocacy work and policy work and climate justice related work, quite frankly, like there's not as much job opportunity there. The market is just not as strong and it's not growing as much, unfortunately. Like I would love to see lots more philanthropic dollars going towards climate justice focused organizations, but the reality is that less than 2% of all philanthropic dollars that are in the world of philanthropy are donated towards climate. There's just not enough money going towards that. And as such, most of these organizations, which are nonprofits, just cannot, they don't have the budget to hire a lot. So yeah, I'm not doing a very good job of succinctly answering your question.
No, I, on the contrary, I think you're doing an excellent job. I think one of the things that, in interacting with students a lot at UC Merced is that there might be someone, let's say a lot of good friend, actually, I'll talk about a good friend. He works for Apple, is a packaging engineer, went to school with me, with my roommate in college, a mechanical engineer by trade, right? But his team specifically works on removing plastics in Apple products designs. So you'll see a shift away from plastics, as they have a company-wide goal of removing plastics by 2025. And so he himself, thinks of himself as a mechanical engineer, cares about the environment. But if someone was to ask him, is your job a climate focused job? He's like, I don't really see myself as a climate activist in that space, but I am doing climate work by working for this company who a lot of people probably on this call have some kind of Apple product, and to know that the reason they're shifting right to kind of these paper molds, right, is so that they can start removing some of this plastic. So I think getting people to understand that you don't just have to go into environmental policy to work on climate. You can be a software engineer, a mechanical engineer. You can work in housing. You could, for people who are interested in doing medicine, right, and looking at tropical diseases as they spread further away from the equator due to climate change, that like you have a role to play, even if you wouldn't necessarily fit into that neat category of environmental job, right? And so I think it's good to hear, right? That like, hey, if you're into software engineering and you're really passionate about climate work, that not only is there a space for you, it seems like it's a space that's in high demand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that any skill set can be used for working on climate change, and I think that quite frankly, any role can be a climate job too. Like, I mean, I remember at our very first event, we had Crystal Chisel, who's like head of communications at Project Drawdown, kick off our event with a little speech. And at the time, I was like kind of frustrated, but when she said this, but of course I agree with it. She was like, yeah, thank you all for coming to this climate career fair. I just want to say though that like any job can be a climate job. And I was like, actually, like that's like not the thesis we're working on here. But she's got a point, which is like, if you're working at a organization that is not working on climate and your role is not necessarily climate focused, anyone can be a change agent and make their organization's practices more, I hate saying this word, but more green, more climate positive is the phrase I like to use. Any organization, any person at any organization has that opportunity. And at Climatebase, we just, quite frankly, we see value in going really, really specific, because there's a subset of people who want to go beyond just, leveraging their position in whatever role at whatever organization. Like there are people out there that want their time to be spent as impactfully as possible. And those people generally want that for them, that usually means working at an organization that is focused on climate change. I also think that there's something really special that comes from doing that, where it's not like a side hustle. It's not like part of your, like a little thing that you're doing is like, oh yeah, like we created a climate club at Oracle, and every month we get together and talk about things that we can do to like green our offices. I mean, it's like that can be really valuable and provide a lot of meaning for folks. But I think you get a lot more meaning and purpose from being a part of a team that, like, together as an organization, your mission is climate change, is addressing climate change. I talk about the concept of ikigai a lot. In fact, our logo, people have asked me before, like, what does your logo mean? It's, this is kind of like weird. Some people think it's like a clover. Other people, I think they think it looks like a knockoff of like the Slack logo or a Google logo because of the 4 colors, but whatever, what are you gonna do? But what it really is the intersection of 4 circles. And that represents this concept of ikigai, which is a Japanese term, which most directly translates to your purpose for being, your reason for waking up in the morning. And it's a term I got introduced to while working at my old startup Make School. We were running a program in Tokyo, and I was lucky enough to be able to be the person who went out there. And what Ikigai is about the intersection of the answer to 4 key questions. And those questions are: 1, what are you good at doing? 2, what do you like doing? 3, what can you get paid to do? And 4, what does the world need? And traditionally, in most Western sort of career guidance advice, it's limited to the first 3. It's, again, are you good at doing? What do you like doing? What you can get paid to do, right? And I was like, I remember going to my college counseling center when I was at UC Santa Barbara, and it was a lot of it was focused around that. But I think the 4th piece, what does the world need, is honestly like arguably the best place to start. Because if you can identify something that freaks you out or scares you or like really gets you going, something, and I say like, not this, the world needs music, okay, and maybe you love music, and okay, that's great. But like, what is a problem that freaks you out? If you can start with that question, figure the thing out that like scares you or makes you angry, right? And then work backwards and say, okay, well, climate change scares me and I'm freaked out about it. What can I do that's related to climate change that I'm good at? And what can I do that I'm good at that's related to climate change that I like doing also? And also then what can I do that I like doing, that I'm good at, that's related to climate change, that also allows me to get paid? And I think like working in that order can be a really valuable way for people to find their own ikigai. And I think more often than not, that usually results in people wanting to work for an organization that is actually focused on climate.
As a quick follow-up, I think we use the word purpose and meaningful and impactful, and that's a term that kind of when we've been looking at like the future of work and the future labor force, right? With millennials and younger generations, right? Increasingly looking at companies and saying, like, what impact are you having, and is it positive for the world, right? And then what we're seeing is that like a lot of these companies are also are either forward looking, right, and are trying to adapt to this new workforce that wants impactful work, and then others are finding themselves unable to satisfy that need from this future labor force, and climate is being one of the purposes that people are finding a calling in nowadays. Are you, when you look at people who are engaging in your platform, are you finding it to be younger folks? Is it like even across the board for people who are working on it? Like, where are you seeing these kind of common trend of people looking for impactful work? And was it something that was cultivated in you during your time in the UC system?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's what makes our platform, I think, also valuable for employers who are on our platform, is that what they're finding is they're, what they need are people who are really dedicated to the mission of the work, not just there to collect the paycheck. People who are mission driven, employees who are mission driven, there's a ton of research from McKinsey and Forbes and a lot of different orgs that have, and even LinkedIn. They are twice as likely to end up in leadership positions within the organization after 2 years. They are 50% more likely to have not left the organization within the first year, so their retention rate is a lot higher. And this is something that I wouldn't say on our platform, but I know that employers know it. They tend to be cheaper in terms of their salary, because they're not just joining for the money, they're joining for the mission. They're joining because they're looking forward to being able to wake up every morning and get to work on something that actually provides them with a sense of purpose. And money can't buy you purpose. That's some, I mean, I know the old Beatles song, but I think love and purpose are very interchangeable in today's world, and that just doesn't come from a paycheck. I have a lot of friends who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, working as software engineers and doing software sales at organizations that they don't really care about. And what I see time and time again is that at a certain point, usually at around the 2.5 year mark, they get bored and they're like, this is not fulfilling my soul. It's not feeding me from a sort of a spiritual perspective. And they end up, coming to Climatebase. Yeah, so and getting back to this concept of purpose, I mean, this is like my favorite topic to talk about. So I'm glad you're asking. Like, there's a lot of greenwashing out there, but there's also a lot of purpose washing out there. And I've seen websites that try to create like job platforms where the framework isn't necessarily like climate or environmental work, but like rather the sustainable development goals, the UN's SDGs that they created back in 2017. And I think that the framework is incredibly powerful, and the SDGs are a great way to think about the problems and that we have to work towards solving. But I think it's very easy for any organization in the world to be able to say that they're working on SDG number 7 and number 9 and number 17, because who's to say that Wells Fargo isn't working to alleviate poverty? I'm sure they believe they are in many ways. And, and I'm sure that Sally Mae is, they really believe that they are empowering education and trying to educate the world. But there's no data to say that they are or they aren't. There's many ways that you can examine these organizations and say, hey, how impactful are you, and in what ways? What I like about climate is that, first of all, every single SDG, every single sustainable development goal that the UN has in their framework can be actually fit within the climate framework. And so I think the better way of looking at purpose, quite frankly, in my opinion, is it working on climate change? Because climate change impacts every other major issue we have. It worsens every other major issue that we have. And without solving the climate crisis, we realistically cannot solve all the other challenges that we face. So, I'm a little bit of a purist, as you might be able to tell when it comes to this, but like, I really believe that like climate is the framework that we need to be thinking through as we look at every other issue, education, gender equality, racial justice, even prison reform. I mean, in many ways, there's ties to climate justice there, right? So, anyway, I should probably stop talking here. But anyway, that's my perspective. I think that that purpose can be found easily through dedicating yourself to working on climate.
Evan, I have a question for you.
Yeah, I'm also hearing an echo of myself in the background. Is anyone else hearing that? Okay, it could be useful for, am I still hearing it? I'm still hearing it.
Yeah,
okay.
we can.
Okay, I think we're good. I don't hear an echo anymore. Is that, Peter, is it you that has the question? Okay, so you're on mute right now. There should be a button on the bottom left.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So, do you agree with this notion? There are many large companies who are obviously in engineering, manufacturing, a variety of other commercial endeavors that by their very nature are involved in changing, if you will, climate to a certain extent without necessarily advertising it. And the question is, how quickly do you think they might jump on the bandwagon of corporate responsibility? The notion that they're good companies, they're stewards of the environment, and would that create the job openings that they may have that are oriented towards whether it's engineering or et cetera, would that lure people to work for them? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. So the question being, would I agree with that notion, and how quickly do we think that that'll happen? I think it's.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already seeing this. Like, we're already seeing the fact that like every organization that has a big brand is working on their sustainable image, their sustainable branding. And And I think that's great. And I also think that there, could be some downsides to that. I mean, the concept of greenwashing is pretty real. A great example would be like an oil company or an energy company, I should say. What is it? It's like 90% or 95% of like BP's. Actually, Peter, if you don't mind, would you mind putting yourself back on mute? Because I think I'm hearing an echo again, and I think it might be coming from you. Okay, thank you. Like 95 or something, like in the 90% of the commercials that are running on TV for BP, include a lot of imagery of like, carbon capture and using algae to sequester CO2 and windmills and wind turbines, I should say. But in reality, only 2% of their R&D is actually going towards this. And so, that discrepancy, I think, is the definition of greenwashing. And I think that extends to organizations that are not just energy companies, but all kinds of other organizations are doing similar things, perhaps not as egregiously. But they're doing it because they recognize that for two main reasons. Well, I guess three. One, there's a lot of demand from investment. People want to invest their dollars, whether they trade on the stock market, or whether they're institutional investors. They want to invest in things that are, part of this ESG movement, and with a heavy emphasis on sustainability. But it's also really that their consumers are demanding it. People, you and me, we're all demanding a more environmentally sustainable, a more climate positive world. But then there's that other component, which is the talent factor. If you look at a lot of the big tech companies, that's a huge portion of how they work on their employer branding is around telling that story to their employees and their prospective employees about how what their organization is doing is how they're leaders in whatever industry that they're in. So I think it's just a reality, and I think it's all in all a very good thing because. But I wouldn't say that they're leaders. I would say that normal people in the world are the leaders, and they're just adapting to the trend that they're recognizing that they have to be a part of. Otherwise, they'll be left behind. They won't sell their products. They won't attract the talent. They won't attract the investment dollars. I think the leading organizations, to clarify, I think the leading organizations are the ones that are actually focused as a mission on climate, because at the end of the day, we need more innovation. We need to evolve pretty much every sector that exists rapidly so that we can decarbonize as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I also wanted to be sure that we addressed Amy's question from previously. She said, how do you build the resource? For example, how do you find the organizations and the jobs?
Tediously. No. So in the beginning, what we are is a marketplace, and we happen to be focused on talent and climate, and jobs, climate jobs, and mission-driven talent. So in the beginning, we had to kickstart this marketplace. When you're starting a marketplace, you have to populate at least one side of that marketplace rapidly. Our career fair was a test, and it gave us, 700 emails of people that, were of that talent side of the marketplace. But when we went online and we started having to build this out online, we had to add a lot of jobs ourselves. We spent, an embarrassingly amount of, I won't even get into exactly how we did it because it's borderline embarrassing to me. And now in retrospect, knowing what I now know, but we literally were finding jobs at organizations that we were identifying. Remember that spreadsheet I mentioned that we originally started with? So that spreadsheet, we were going through there and looking at their career pages and basically doing the heavy lifting for our users. The same thing that we knew a lot of people are doing on their own, we basically did it for them. Now, at this point, we have enough traction, in the past 30 days, there's been just around 20,000 people on our platform, using our platform, where employers know about us and job seekers know about us, and the word of mouth has kickstarted this flywheel beyond what we were doing ourselves more manually. So, my advice on how to get this started is less specific around Climatebase, and more advice around how to kickstart a marketplace. Figure out the one side of the marketplace that you can populate on your own, and do that, and then eventually the people will come, and then eventually you'll get that flywheel going. I'm seeing a question from I think it's
Kaya.
Kaya.
Yeah, no, I was actually just going to ask if I could ask the question, because I have kind of two. So I kind of have one question, as in, like, what advice do you have for those of us who feel they have enough experience and or just enough passion to really be willing to do any job, like to help the climate crisis, but aren't sure quite how to sell our experience and ourselves essentially to land that job? So that's question one. And then question two is, like, kind of as mentioned previously, sustainability and or just solving climate is a new field, and there's so many new jobs that I know I'm finding it really difficult to find, like, the job title specifically to even be able to search what I'm qualified to be able to then apply for and get, so that I can work towards those bigger issues. Because, like, I've only had so many jobs because I am young, but I know that I have a lot to offer, but it's hard to find the job to apply for in the first place.
What's your background, if you don't mind sharing?
I work at a university as a sustainability coordinator, and I've been working, I'm in an AmeriCorps position, so I'm actually on my second term as AmeriCorps, which is a full-time volunteer kind of program. So I work on campus sustainability issues, anything ranging from me personally dumping into dumpsters to get contaminated recycling to teaching others how to change their own personal behavior, and work on a lot of different topics. Like I'm helping with our bus rapid transit system at the university that's going to be happening. So I'm working with, like, I've been able to sit in on those, even though I'm mostly just a major generalist. But I'm almost finished with those terms, and I've have almost about 5 years of experience. But I don't have a master's degree, and a lot of programs are like, oh, we're looking for master's degrees or something like that. And it's like, okay, how are you expecting this field to grow when you're expecting people that have master's degrees who don't have them? There's not enough people out there that have them. But yeah. So that's kind of my struggle that I'm working through.
I totally. I mean, honestly, like, I think that's one of the biggest challenge. That's one of the things that, like, kind of, it's one of the challenges that I see pretty frequently is that people with, like, more classic sustainability backgrounds actually have, like, kind of a hard time breaking into climate focused organizations, because a lot of the organizations, I'll be honest, are, I would say the bulk of them are research and advocacy nonprofits. And the ones that are focused on research are, it's usually think tanks and like, deep technology, sort of like R&D stage kind of research. And then it's a lot of, like, climate tech companies. I mean, I know our platform definitely skews more towards the climate tech sort of side of things. And I think it's really hard for people with sustainability backgrounds to be able to break into that. I mean, to be honest, like, for you specifically, I mean, have you been working on, like, like carbon accounting? Do you have any experience in carbon accounting specifically?
Like this much. Like I have so many jobs that I've had to do because we're obviously, like, a nonprofit that doesn't have a lot of positions. So, like, I have so much experience in very wide ranges, but I don't have it in, like, super deep. And so, like, yes, I could sign on to be like, yes, I'm familiar enough. But then how do I sell that? Because a lot of times, if, like, you say that you have carbon accounting experience there, I'm assuming that they're expecting years of experience just doing that, rather than just brief experience enough to be able to ask questions and move on. So that's kind of like where I'm struggling, being like, okay, am I even qualified for that job for that specific thing? Because it's like, it's really specific. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, my advice would be, first of all, create a profile on Climatebase, because, there's
I already started doing that. I listened to a podcast right before this because I noticed your name and I was like, this is like a cool website. So I searched you and then I found a podcast that you were talking about this. But so I already started signing up, but I didn't finish the podcast, so I don't know the end of it. But
Which one, by the way?
I think it was like the first podcast of their series. I think it was like 20 here. I can look it up.
Saving the World or something like that?
It's Climate Designers.
Oh, yeah. Mark and those folks. Yeah.
Yeah, I just started listening to it like right before this because I was like, oh, I should probably have some questions ready because I have no idea what you're going to talk about. But
well, first of all, let me say that podcast is so out of date. Like I recorded that over a year and a half ago, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know. I got to go back and listen to that and potentially ask them to re-record because I think we need to give an update. So honestly, my advice is like, and I know this is like kind of shitty to hear, but it sounds like you've been doing very, very specific kinds of work. And if you want to kind of like break into a different area of climate, you kind of might need to like, take this experience, wrap it,
wrap it up and move on.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe, the next thing.
And I'm a big believer in doing things for free and like give, and then eventually you'll get. And I know that there's been backlash against unpaid internships and people feeling like no, people should get paid for their work. But how do you get paid to do work that you have no experience in? Or like, I mean, I'm not saying you have no experience in. I'm just saying like, like if I want, like, this is why I wanted to work in climate. And like, literally, if my whole organization falls apart, like I'm going to be the user of my platform to get a job in climate. And I'll be dealing with the same thing you did. I'll be like, well, my experience is in a climate related thing. I helped start this thing called Climatebase. You may have heard of it, but I don't have any actual experience in like the one specific thing you're doing. I would say like just start interviewing people and find someone who you really resonate with and
shadow and follow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is a similar advice that I've gotten. And even I've just told myself through this thing. So I think it's helpful to get that feedback from you just because it's like another thing that's just saying, yeah, you're doing the right thing by just exiting and doing something else to get that experience. But yeah, appreciate your feedback.
Evan, I'm so glad you went back to, this is Liz, I'm so glad you went back to the concept of interviewing people, doing the work that you aspire to do. It's called informational interviewing. And as you mentioned earlier, people love to talk about what they do. So if you can get onto LinkedIn or some of the organizations that you find on Evan's site and reach out as somebody that's an advocate and interested in the sector, you'll find people that will want to share their story and maybe even introduce you to folks within their network. I think that would be great. And by having a generalist background, if I could, it's terrific because our issues are being solved by teams and they're being solved by interdisciplinary teams where everybody has some unique skills that they bring to solving the problem, right? And the presenting problem. And you have enough of a generalist background that you can now relate to and bring all of those diverse backgrounds and skill sets together in a more cohesive way because you have a bit of an understanding about a lot of things. So, when you say, how do I wrap it up? That might help. Sorry.
No, I really appreciate that feedback because I also have a generalist degree. Like I'm a geography person, like I'm a geography major. I've got a botany minor to help make it go a little bit more, but like that's not where my passion is. So yeah, I appreciate that feedback. And also anybody that keeps chatting me, I appreciate you too. I've gotten a few of you private chatting me, so I appreciate you. Thanks.
So I want to say real quick, like part of our fellowship program, which again, like is going from this, small cohort to a much more scaled out program with more people in it. Part of the quote unquote curriculum, though it will be optional, like everything in this will be honestly optional. There's no grades with the Climatebase Fellowship. But like one of the things that we'll be encouraging, strongly encouraging anyone going through the program will be to interview the founders of the organizations that you are most interested in. And one of the things that is, I think, often hard for people, because like, I agree with what Liz is saying. Again, that's how I even got into startups, is like, I literally just started interviewing people for a blog. And it's the best social hack that exists. Like, in fact, I took that experience, and that's why I did the Climate Career Fair in person. Again, this is pre-website days, because I thought like, well, interviewing people, like, that's good, and I could do that, but like, I could also like let myself be known to all these organizations by putting myself at the center of a network that is a in-person event. Obviously, events are harder to pull off now, and honestly, in retrospect, I would not even recommend doing a career fair. It's like, we spent like 4 months working on this because we had no budget, no brand. I'm glad I did it, but like, only because now I know not to do that. But like, it still achieved that same goal. And like, you can do that now. Like, the tools that exist for whether it's, podcasts, or even just like having a real conversation and then using a tool like otter.ai to transcribe everything for you. When I was doing interviews, I had to literally get the recording and then like manually like pause and then write out that sentence and then click play and listen to it and do it again and then edit the whole thing. I mean, you don't have to do any of that anymore. I think it's the best social hack that exists. Find people that you aspire to be like, or work at their company, interview them, and that's literally baked into what we are doing with the fellowship. Like, we know that this works, and what we offer as to our fellows, as opposed to doing this on your own, is that we actually have an audience of, like a lot of people. Our emailing list is, about to reach over 20,000. Our open rate is over 50%. So every email that we send out is being seen by over 10,000 people. That's great for any employer who's being highlighted by one of our fellows who's doing an interview about what they're doing. And so it's a really great exchange of value. The employers and the founders who are getting interviewed get that spotlight, they get their egos flattered, and they get to evangelize the work they're doing in a way that isn't so self-promotionally. It's great for us at Climatebase because this is content and our readers love to hear it, and it enriches our platform. But I think the real winner is the fellows, because they get that one-on-one time. They get an excuse to have an interview with someone, and they get to say to that person, hey, also, by the way, I'm a Climatebase fellow. This will be read by probably a few thousand people, on a platform where you're already hiring. And that's a really strong, just like, exchange of value between all parties. So even if you're not interested in joining the fellowship, what I'll say is do it on your own. It's worth it. My friend Sophie, she started an entire blog called Climate Tech VC. She started this at the beginning of 2020. The readers list has gotten to over 5,000 people in just a year. She is now working in climate tech as a VC herself as a result of doing this. And I'm pretty sure like Warren Buffett's like associate is like a subscriber right now. So, the creator generation, the era for being a creator and building your own audience and becoming your own little media mogul that is where we are at right now. And if you have a passion and you want to explore it and build a brand, your own personal brand around it, now is the best time to get to work on that. Does anyone else have any like questions? Because I got to say, I'm a little late getting to my next thing, and I'm really enjoying this. So if there's any like burning questions, please ask now. And if not, that is all good. Oh, sorry, was someone going to say something?
Yeah, I have one kind of burning question, which might allow us to end on a awesome note, if you can think of any stories. But have you heard any stories from either the employer who has hired a really awesome candidate, or a job seeker who's gotten like the job, the opportunity of a lifetime? Have you gotten any like awesome stories that you want to share?
I can share the email that I got this morning from someone who originally attended our first career fair, like all these, I guess, over a year ago. Where is it? Let me just see. I know it's in here somewhere.
Sorry to put you on your spot.
No. Well, okay, so I have one email here from this guy, Troy, who's he's hired 12 people through our platform. I think that's the most of any employer, and he was just reaching out to say thank you. Gosh, where is that email? Sorry, I know I have it. It's like right here. Yes, sweet. Hey, Evan, we met a few times in the early days of Climatebase, back when it was Climate Careers. Your first event directly led me to my current position. Loving the new updates and excited to see more. Just wanted to say thanks for creating something I've been looking for since I entered the job market, and helping accelerate climate work all over. And I got that at 11 a.m., so just 4 hours ago. And he's now working at O-Power, which is like an energy monitoring company that actually got acquired by Oracle. So for me, very weird and full circle in that sense, given that that's where I started my career. So yeah, I mean, like I'll just say, like, I mean, I know this isn't helping anyone here, but I'll just say that, like, I love the work I do, and I hope that I've found my own ikigai and my own purpose by doing this, because I think, it's not just about making an impact on climate, but I think about making impact on people, like real people's real lives. So much of our time is spent working, and to know that that time is time well spent, and it's working on something that means something to you is really powerful. And I guess I get to, like, kind of live vicariously through these people who are using our platform to success. And I love hearing these stories. I just wish people would tell me sooner, because I think this guy got his job like many months ago, and he's only telling me now. So so if anyone here ends up getting a job through Climatebase, like, please let me know as quickly as possible, because that's honestly, like, the money is not coming in right now. So that's the thing that's really keeping us going, is knowing that what we're doing is making a difference for people.
Thank you. I really like the idea of ikigai as well. I think it's something we can all ponder. I appreciate your time, and I will thank you all for attending. And yeah, if anyone has further questions, I'm sure we could, ask them via email. After this, I will send out the recording so you can rewatch this as many times as you would like. I also put a link to a feedback form if you would like to fill that out about today's event, as well as nominate other AMA people, because I agree, like, interviewing people is awesome. So this is not like a formal interview, but I love doing this kind of thing. So if you want to hear from other AMA guests and you want to nominate them, feel free. Otherwise,
can I just say one thing before you end? This is Debbie Rowe, and I run the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development. Save the chat and share all the resources that I put in there, because I put in a massive amount of resources about jobs and careers, and I think it would be useful to share along with the recording. And Evan and Aaron, thanks for everything you're doing.
Hey,
yeah.
Deborah, hello. I wish I had known that you were on this call earlier. We should chat. I'm gonna drop a link to my profile on Climatebase. I know the URL is climate.careers. We're moving it all over to Climatebase in the next month or two, but that is my profile, and feel free to, like, hit me up there. You do have to create an account to message me, as any other professional platform will have you do. But yeah. That's the best way to get in contact with me, is just message.
Okay, well, I'm put my email in here, and you can also just reach out to me too. And I made up my own career in climate, so it was great to hear these stories today. So thank you so much for all your efforts.
Thank you for that note. I actually will put those resources for sure in the email as well. So you'll get those awesome resources to all of the links in the podcast and Drawdown and all of the like.
Wonderful. Just one thing, don't put my email out to everybody, okay? I just gave that to him. If other people want to contact me, use that email instead, the Climate Fixes, okay? Because otherwise it gets clogged. Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. And I'll also mention that Drawdown is doing their conference, actually their, like, big yearly conference. It's online, so not in person, which is a good thing. And that's actually starting tomorrow. And I'll be speaking on, I have a pre-recorded thing where I kind of say a lot of the same stuff I said today. So I don't know if you want to watch that, but also be, like, on a live panel with Bill Weil, who's who's the former Chief Sustainability Officer for Google and Facebook, and someone I very much look up to. So if anyone here wants to see me fanboy out live, you can watch me get tongue-tied as I try to keep up with Bill. Feel free to tune in. Just type in Drawdown Conference on Google and you'll find it.
What time is your session?
I forget. Hopefully I remember, but yeah, no, I don't remember. It's off the top of my head. I know that it's like a 4-day conference. I think mine is in the last 2 halves of the day, but regardless, registration is free. So check it out. I think there'll be like 4,000 folks tuning in.
I'm excited about it.
I am too.
It's fun.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat. Thank you all for sticking it out for me. I know this was a small group, but sometimes I really love the small groups because then we can actually have like a real dialogue. Yeah, and Kia, right? Kaya?
It's Kaya.
Kaya.
But yes.
Kaya, awesome. Well, Kaya, feel free to hit me up on Climatebase, and let's stay in contact. I'm trying to be as accessible as possible. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.